my gosh, we're getting ready to talk about everyone's second favorite subject. No, it's not enemas, it's fungus. So I moved to Colorado 4 years, or actually it was about 5 years ago, after I was at the end of my recovery. And for some reason, intuitively, I knew that I wanted to go to a drier climate. And you may not notice my accent, but I'm from sweet old South Carolina. And the problem is that I grew up in South Carolina, running track and field, and I feel like that type of weather was completely oppressive. I don't know if it's just because I'm white, Nordic, I have no idea. Maybe that's part of it, but I feel that a lot of people that live down south probably have some type of serious to mild Candida problem. Oh my gosh, anybody with a biology degree will tell you how wild and woolly it really is when you're talking about microorganisms. And when I'm talking about woolly, I'm talking about when you put something in a petri dish and then you go back and check it in a few days, it gets real woolly. Now, you can have a lot of problems with Candida, I believe, in certain climates. I believe people who live out in arid climates have a less chance of developing Candida. Now, in Chinese medicine, if you went to see a Chinese medicine doctor, they explain it as being damp. So that they'll tell you to eat drying type foods like mung bean, for example, or another good one is green tea extract or green tea, which have very good drying properties. Now, one of the best ways to treat and even prevent Candida is going on an anti-Candida diet, and there are just loads and loads of books about that subject. So if you do have Candida, you may want to go and check out one of these books and get on it. When I was sick, I took a vacation out to Moab, Utah. And even though I was so sick, for some reason, briefly, while I was out there for several weeks, I was hiking and backpacking, and I was in extreme heat, and it was extremely dry, and I was loving it, and I was feeling good. Now, I had people ask me, do they think that they need to move to a drier climate to get over Candida? Well, I believe the answer is no, but I also believe that it could help you a lot if you did at least perhaps take your vacations out to drier climates. And Moab, for example, is a fantastic place to visit. It's very inspiring, beautiful landscapes, and if you like to do things outdoors, it's got everything. So the tip there really is try to get into drier climates if you can. If you cannot, then you're just going to have to do with what you got. If you live in a very damp climate, let's say the Pacific Northwest or the Northeast, or if you live in the southern states, you probably have something beyond just a climate issue. You probably also have an issue with mold. Now, there are some places in this country that have all kinds of weird mold. Let's say Phoenix, for example. There's a time of the year that there's tons of mold that's actually in the air, just floating around. You also have the type of mold in these damp climates or damp areas, whether you're in Ireland or Scotland or if you're in the United States. If you live in one of these places, you do need to check to make sure that your house does not have mold, and it needs to be mitigated if it is, because you will never get over your illness of either mold sensitivity or having too many mold toxins in your body or having Candida. It just won't happen. You have to take yourself out of that situation first, which is very difficult for some people, but it can also make a huge difference. But the other issue really is, how do you even know if you have Candida? Well, there's a couple of different ways to test. If you go to a very standard doctor, they're probably going to give you a blood test to see if you have Candida. It's a quantitative blood test, and you'll know if Candida is in your blood. Now, if it is in your blood, more than likely it came from somewhere and it probably stemmed from the gut. That means that Candida is systemic, so it moves out of the gut once it's so plentiful and it gets into your blood and it makes you feel awful. The other one is getting a GI stool test. Now, a lot of more traditional doctors don't give the stool test, but I like the stool test because if there is a high amount of Candida on the stool test, let's say you get a rating of 3 or 4, then you can pretty much deduce the fact that with that kind of load, it probably is in your blood. But the other good thing about a GI stool test is that you can also find out what bacteria overgrowth that you have. The only downfall to that is knowing that there's so many different types of pathogens that can get out of control in your gut. You have to realize that your test is only going to be showing a very small percent of what actually can be tested. You can also find out what your reaction to gluten, to soy, and to dairy, and how bad of a reaction you actually have to these foods. And lastly, you can find out what the overall health of your GI system is, which can be very beneficial in knowing whether or not you need to go really super hard in treating your gut. But sometimes that testing is a little superfluous because, to tell you the truth, everybody who's chronically ill is going to have a problem with their gut, period. I don't know if there's anybody out there who does not have a problem with their gut. Something to think about. Well, I guess I need to tell you about these 2 other simpler tests to do. One's not so simple, but if you do go to see a healthcare provider who has a bioresonance machine, sometimes called biofeedback or also called energetic medicine, sometimes you get these fancy little reports that can tell you all kinds of things, and they're pretty accurate. I've heard anything around 85 to 95% accurate, and that's pretty good. So you can deduce a lot of things from getting one of those scans. And also, on the scan, you can get, Candida scanned and to see what your rating is for that. The other way, which is probably the most simple at-home thing that you can do, is the spit test. It's basically when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do yeah, that's how you do it. You just spit in a glass of water. I can't believe I just did that in front of you. Just spit in a glass of water. Now, this is not a good test because this is the afternoon for me. And also, I don't have Candida. And if I did, you'd probably see a bunch of stringy stuff coming down. I don't know how well you can see this. But there's not a whole lot of stuff coming down. So basically, if you had Candida, you'd see a lot of strings coming down, just kind of floating down. The spit needs to stay on top. So that's the spit test. It's that easy. How about that? Diet, climate, antibiotics, pretty much is a given. As soon as you get on those for a while, you're definitely going to have Candida. Chlorine in your water can wipe out all the good bacteria, so the bad stuff flourishes. Birth control, steroids, diet high in sugar, and refined foods. That basically is the gamut of things that can create Candida. Now, part of the reason why I think people go on this whole Lyme roller coaster where they take antibiotics and then they get sick again, they take antibiotics and they get sick again, part of it is that they're using so many drugs that they're getting to the point where they're dependent on this stuff. Then when they get off of it, their body is just wiped out of everything that created the balance. So people take all these drugs, they feel better, all of a sudden they're just like wiped out again. It's like, vicious, vicious, vicious cycle. And I think it gets worse as it goes on. As the longer that people are on this cycle, the worse their recovery becomes, the harder it gets to become. That's probably what you're thinking, right? I mean, how many times does somebody get prescribed Nystatin from a doctor? That is like the go-to antifungal. The problem with this is that there are lots of different strains of Candida, just like probiotics, just like bacteria, all different types of varying things. And also, all these little candidas, different types, Candida, has varying sensitivities to antifungals and herbals. So basically, you got different strands that react to different treatments. So it gets really complicated. So it's kind of, I don't want to say it's pig-headed or anything like that, but it's just not really well thought out if someone just prescribes you Nystatin. I can't tell you how many people get on that and they're just like, it's not working. So you can get these strands tested to see which different types of antifungals and which different types of herbs or oils or whatnot, plant oils that could be very, very good for killing the infection. Or you could just have a better plan. And a better plan would be something that's extremely comprehensive and extremely intensive, meaning that you're basically attacking this from different angles. Lastly, let's just say that you go in to see a doctor. And let's say you've been fighting Lyme for a number of years. Let's say you found out that you had fungus. I believe you need to treat your fungus first. And the reason why is because you can have a lot of immediate relief that you probably need. And of course, when you start feeling better, your well-being is better, your emotional state's better. But I think you should treat the fungus first, get on a very intensive fungal plan, and part of what kills a fungus is also going to be antibacterial, which means it's going to start working on the Lyme as well. And that's what I have to say about fungus.